Welcome to Gold Derby. I'm senior editor Denton Davidson here with Julia Nottingham, producer of the Netflix documentary The Greatest Night in Pop, about the night in 1985 when music's biggest stars gathered to record We Are the World. Julia, there's so much incredible footage, interviews, outtakes in this film. What took nearly 40 years for someone to do a deep dive like this? Because they had the behind the scenes sort of in 85, but nothing like this with interviews and real stories behind everyone participating.
I think it took 40 years because people did try. They just tried almost like the wrong route, I suppose. And I had enough naivety and tenacity to just find a different road. And I hadn't really made a music film with this many stars ever. Like I've obviously made a lot of documentaries in my career. And I think because I approached it in a way of, I suppose, not feeling kind of totally terrified by the thought of, oh, I'm sure I can just phone the Michael Jackson estate and ask them if they want to partake. I really did genuinely go in with that naivety. But what ended up happening was I got pitched the idea by a development producer that I work with here at Dorothy Street. We have weekly development meetings. And someone said, do you know the song? But do you know the story behind the song? And of course, I just couldn't quite believe when they told me the story and the fact that it was, recorded over one night and, all the stress. And so I tried the normal routes first. So I went to Lionel Richie's camp. I went to the Jackson estate and I didn't get a response. I don't think I got a response because they didn't, like the pitch. I think they probably just get many, many in. And so I kind of started thinking, how do I get into this world? And I remembered that the American Music Awards are owned by Clark Productions. And at the time, I was working with MRC, who owned Dick Clark Productions at the time, and so I phoned a guy called Amit Day, who was an executive producer on the documentary, and I said, "Oh, do you know anyone at Dick Clark Productions who I could speak to? Maybe they were there on the night." And so they gave me a name for someone at Dick Clark Productions. And as soon as I called them, they said, look, you have to call Larry Klein. He was the guy that was the producer of the AMAs. He produced the AMAs for, I think, 30 odd years. And he was also there for the night of the recording. And so I eventually got his phone number, and it was a mobile number for Turks and Caicos. So I was thinking, okay, there's someone in Turks and Caicos. And when I eventually got through and gave him like the 20-second elevator pitch, he was like, oh, I've been waiting for this phone call for 35 years. And I think the truth is just no one knew to call him. He was the connective tissue. He was best friends with Michael. He was really close with Lionel. He was great friends with Ken Cragen. And so we then just started this relationship where for 3 months, I kind of had to slightly prove myself to him. Like he watched the Bruce Lee film I made with Bao. He loved that, and just slowly got him to really trust me that I was kind of legitimate and I would handle the story with care. And then in an amazing kind of turn of events, he introduced me to the folks at USA for Africa. Then he introduced me to Lionel. And then when I had both of those on board, we went to the Jackson estate. So yeah, it was a long documentary producer road of just keeping going.
And as a producer, what is the most important for you in terms of elements that you have to get right? I mean, for this film to work, you need the stories, and the footage. So is it the Jackson estate that owned the footage? Is that what was so important
Um,
about that?
so Lionel and the Jackson Estate, they own the rights to the song. So they both wrote the song. So they have the publishing, and they were integral to it. However, the footage is all owned by USA for Africa, the charity. But the big question was, I got pitched the idea and was like, wow, this is the most incredible story. And I was hearing about Dylan and I was hearing about Stevie. And I'll say, but you know what? It's not going to really work if we can't see it. And that was then the other just really long road of like trying to find the tapes. USA for Africa had some copies of the tapes, but like for example, like 2 years into the show, we found some tapes in a car trunk. It was just one of those things. And I think because of the Jane Fonda piece, a lot of people are like, look, they've used the footage. It doesn't really have a use anymore because Jane Fonda made a great documentary on it. But as you know, you know, that was made in the 80s, and documentaries have changed so much. And so again, we had a great archive producer on the team, but we really we had to search high and low for every single bit of footage we could find. And I remember really clearly, actually, the day that we saw the Jackson footage of him singing, you know, and I said, look, if even if we only just have this is documentary gold, and I think we're going to be okay. But you know, we did have many moments in the early stages of thinking maybe we can't make this film because we don't have the footage, or we don't have enough footage.
Well, for me, I mean, Lionel Richie, you have to have Lionel Richie because Michael's obviously gone. He's the other writer, and he has so many great stories to share in this about writing with Michael. It's just fascinating to hear about their process and how they came up with the lyrics and his stories about Michael's pets. Um, Talk about getting Lionel's involvement. How eager was he to get on board? And then what really makes him stand out in this documentary so much? What was so great to work with about Lionel?
So we were lucky that Larry was close. Larry Klein was close with Lionel and Lionel's manager, and really Larry talked us through like how prepared we have to be. You know, we really have to have all the elements and how we're going to tell the story, and so we laid that all out in a treatment and really meticulously wrote kind of almost like beat by beat how the story would come out, and then and we pitched it to Bruce, and I think Bruce had, you know, Lionel's manager saw how much care and research we had done. Bao had an amazing idea that he wanted to make the movie like a heist film. So, you know, and that the song was, you know, the thing they were trying to heist, and Lionel Richie and his Ocean's 11, you know, Stevie and Quincy. And, you know, that pitch is so good when you kind of hear it, because you're like, wow, if you could pull this off. And then Bao was talking a lot about, you know, the ticking time clock of like, okay, you know, how are we going to get to 5 a.m.? And I think we were lucky also. Everyone seems to be a big Bruce Lee fan. And because Bao and I had made that film a few years ago, we had this, we had an evidence of like how much we loved archive and how we treated it with, you know, with such respect. And also, I think treating it in a way that feels like quite modern and contemporary, because we use, you know, in the Bruce Lee film, we're using, so many different sources of archive to really, really bring you back to that moment. So, you know, that was one of the other pitches to Lionel, was to say, we're going to take people into this room. Like you are going to feel like you're in this room. And yeah, you know, they really liked the pitch, and they said, look, you know, we'll come on board, and we've been asked so many times, but you guys feel like the right match. And so as soon as we knew he was on board, that really started to help unlock. He unlocked Bruce Springsteen for us. You know, their managers are close, and Bruce was like, look, if Lionel's doing it, I'd love to do it. And then I think, you know, the biggest gift of the entire, you know, show in a way was we always wanted Lionel, because he was the master, he was so involved, but we didn't actually realize how amazing a storyteller he is.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the interview that it was almost like he had a semi-photographic memory. He's so good at like describing, and the voices, you're just like, this is a gift. We've been given documentary gold. And he's like the most wonderful man. And, you know, this is a time for him. It was such an important time. And I think especially where he's at now in his career, he takes so much joy looking back to, like, I suppose, the time when maybe the industry was very different. And yeah, for him, it's been a real source of joy, I think, the process and the storytelling of the film.
Yeah, and the way he pulled it off. He was hosting the AMAs that year. I mean, what a boss. I mean, like listening to how this all came together. You mentioned Bao, the director, treating it like a heist film. I love that aspect because we know how this ends. I mean, we all know the song, but the way that like you have the bulletin boards and everything coming together, it felt suspenseful. Like even though we know what happened, it feels like we don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off somehow as we're watching it. So talk about your work with Bao and how much you like partnering with him as a director.
Yeah, I mean, Bao is just, you know, we have a real dream relationship. We love challenging each other. We respect each other. But I think our real unifying thing is we want things to truly be the best. And I think we want them to be the best in storytelling terms, because we love documentaries so much. And, you know, we see our kind of competitors being like fiction movies, not necessarily other, you know, in terms of like their entertainment and story telling values. But I think, you know, on something like this, one of the big things we agreed on was, you know, yes, you know the song, yes, you might know how a song is recorded, but the window this archive put into celebrities and presented them as real people with these vulnerabilities, like that was always our kind of almost North Star, to make sure audiences saw these people, well, these celebrities, as people and just normal human beings with insecurities and you know, all of the things that you watch in that room and you're like, this is Dylan, the you know, the master of songwriting and lyrics and melody, and suddenly you're seeing him in this vulnerable state. And I think, you know, that was a real connective tissue for me and Bao of just making sure we could celebrate actually the vulnerability, because, you know, vulnerability is a thing to be celebrated.
For me, I think maybe the most chilling moment was the moment you mentioned of Michael performing himself. I mean, his voice was just incredible, and it's so intimate because he is doing it alone in that moment. What for you was sort of the kind of spine-tingling moment that caught your eye the most in this?
I mean, I have to say that you know, I'll choose another one as well. But you know, that Michael moment, it's just, you know, I love it for so many reasons, because I think for all of the artists there, you're with them right on the night. You're not like kind of looking into, you know, where they came from or how they got there or what happens in the future. For everyone, it is literally that 3 week period. And so I think to hear Michael and his voice is just, yeah, it really every time we watch it with an audience, it's just, you can hear a pin drop, like everyone is in total silence, and then once the song's, you know, once he's finished, you kind of just hear this almost like you know, gasp, because people are, you know, so I love that. I love so much Stevie mimicking Dylan. I just, you know, I watch that and I'm like, it's musical genius. It's like, it's so incredible, because even when we were doing the mix and stuff, we'd be listening and we were like, he sounds exactly like Dylan, you know. And I didn't know I didn't know that about him. So I love that moment in the film as well.
I also love some of the Huey Lewis moments because he talks about how Prince didn't show up. So he's just kind of handed this solo, and then he's like, now I'm terrified, because he thought he was just gonna be in the chorus. And then he's handed over this solo. Um, Talk about, you know, just getting him on board and hearing about that moment of how much they wanted Prince, but Prince, I'm from Minneapolis, I'm a big Prince fan, so I know his personality, like that doesn't jive with him.
Yeah.
What was that like for you to hear those stories from Huey?
Well, I mean, Huey is he's amazing in himself. He's like, you know, the most upbeat, kind, and just, yeah, wonderful person. And I think, again, you know, he's a big star, yet he still talks about that day being this bag of nerves. And even in the room, you could, it was like palpable, you know, in the interview, how yeah, how he was kind of totally terrified. And, you know, Prince at the time, I think, you know, was the biggest star, and he was just having to fill his boots. And I think one of the things actually that unlocked, so during that Huey section with the when he's trying to sing his lines, the sound is, it's, you know, it's quite tough. Like, you'll notice a few times there are subtitles in the film, and one of the, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but it's fascinating and how it came about. But so we got delivered a load of tapes, and we were like, amazing, we've got all this one camera that we didn't have. Anyway, we got it, put it in, it didn't have any sound. And we were like, oh my God. So we've got all of this, but we don't have any sound. And then our archive producer who's amazing, decided to contact the journalist who had written the Life magazine article, which Ken Cragen had put him on to, yeah, cover the recording of the song. And she got in touch with him and said, oh, like, you didn't have a dictaphone going, you know, like, did you interview people with a dictaphone? And he was like, oh, actually, I had my dictaphone on for the entire time of the whole 3 weeks, not just the night of the studio. He got given the assignment like when Ken Cragen had the idea, and he basically, every time he was in a room with anyone, he kept the dictaphone on. And this just changed everything for us. So like that Huey section, we didn't have a lot of that sound. That sound came from the dictaphone. We had to really clean it up. All the early stuff with Ken Cragen, where they're planning things and Lionel's on the phone and Michael Jackson writing, that all came from the dictaphone. So it, we had moments where we didn't think we had a film, and then I remember that stuff coming to us, and it was like hallelujah. And the editors spent, I'm not kidding you, like weeks and weeks and weeks thinking via ear and eye, because it had no markers or anything. So they literally had to think like every single, it's just completely wild. So yeah, we were very lucky on that.
And Sheila E., I think, was also an interesting story because she had one of the, I mean, she was very proud to be part of it, but she had sort of one of the worst experiences because she felt like maybe she was used to get Prince. And I just thought that was a very interesting story to have in the documentary as well. Just there were both sides of of the coin a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And I think for us, for Bao and I, when Sheila told that story on camera, we both kind of also realized how real this could be. And I think, there is a world in which someone, maybe Lionel or someone might watch this and say, hey, this isn't like that good a reflection. But I think Lionel so wanted the film to document exactly what had happened on the night, that when he watched the film and it was in there, Bao and I were actually a little bit nervous. And he said, no, that's exactly what happened. That's what happened on the night. And I think it just, everyone was so proud of what they achieved that they wanted it to be a truthful, like just the truth to be out, and we were very appreciative that Sheila shared that story and that everyone else supported it being in the film.
And it answered a lot of questions about why certain artists weren't there, like Prince, like Madonna, where they were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
Cindy or Madonna, pick one." That's that's
Yeah.
that's it's mind blowing to think about that now.
It really is. You just, yeah, it's so wild. I'm so happy that I feel like, without, being too cheesy about it, this film was just such a gift. It was hard. The idea first came to me in October 2019. So it was a long road. And, to be fair, there were many moments in that road that we were like, maybe this film, it's not possible to make it. It's not possible to make it because we don't have the archive, we don't have the audio. Is the other permissions going to get too difficult? Is anyone going to want to, talk to us? And yeah, it was a team that were very determined. But yeah, I'm very thankful we pulled it off.
Because you have to get permissions not only from this song, but you have a lot of footage of each of these artists doing their own things. I mean, you have a lot of musical rights, and I mean, we see Dylan, we see all various performers in completely different capacities of their career.
Yeah, we worked really closely with the amazing music supervisor. And, I'll be honest with you, there was a hell of a lot more music in the film for the first rough cut. And I remember sitting with Val being like, okay, we're going to kind of have to dial it down by about like 70%. So, I think we had a good middle ground by the end. But, luckily, the one good thing was that all the artists of the music we were using so fondly remembered the night that even if they didn't want to do an interview, they were like, look, you can use my music. And and I think, to be fair, we did ask quite a lot. We asked everyone really who was there on the night. And I do think there's a few stars that after they saw the movie and loved it so much, they kind of regretted not taking part.
Well, it's such an incredible documentary, especially for like an old music nerd like me who grew up in that era, and just to see everyone and hear everyone's stories, it was really a fascinating documentary. So congratulations. The Greatest Night in Pop is streaming on Netflix, and thanks for sitting down with Gold Derby today.
Thanks so much. Bye.